Imagine you're talking to a friend about something sensitive, but there are too many people around who might be listening, so you decide to go somewhere more private, somewhere quiet, where the conversation can stay just between the two of you. You go to your car. Unfortunately, you've made a grave mistake.
Yeah, no, that's the last place I would advise people to go and take a private conversation nowadays.
According to Andrea Amico, founder of the website Privacy for Cars, cars aren't private places at all. Car privacy is something I've wanted to dive into on this channel for a long time.
Every year our cars are getting smarter and they're more connected than ever. They capture a whole lot of information about you.
We all hear people say that modern cars are spying on us, but most of us have no idea the real extent of it. So I chatted to a bunch of experts, like Andrea, Woody, a digital tracking expert and former instructor for a vehicle forensic company, and Sam, a famous car hacker who does awesome research into their vulnerabilities. And what I learned from them about car privacy was so insane that my one intended video on the subject exploded into a full series. In this series, we examine how easy it is to hack modern cars and how strangers can even get real-time access to things like your car cameras. We explore the trackers in cars that you had no idea existed, like the radio signals beaconed out by your tires that can be used to track you even if you're doing 70 miles per hour down the freeway. We dive into the perverse incentives that drive companies to collect as much data about you as possible, and look at the history of when all this started. Spoiler alert, it's been going on far longer than you ever imagined. And don't even get me started on used cars. We look at how the previous owner of your car might still have access to all your car's remote features, tracking tools, and cameras. And we explain how to wipe your own information and location history from your car before you sell it. These are the kinds of things we investigate as we dive under the hood of car privacy in this series. So let's get started in this first episode by uncovering the kinds of data siphoned from your car every time you hit the road.
Your car knows where you're going, it knows that when you're going, it knows your kind of driving habits.
In short, the modern car has become a privacy nightmare.
Cars collect a lot of data, and I don't know that consumers really understand how much data is being collected by vehicles. The new trend in automotive is to talk about the software-defined vehicles, which essentially means turning cars into smartphones.
In what ways are cars like smartphones? Well, first, they both act as tracking devices, emitting all kinds of radio signals that can be used to pinpoint your location.
Your car is a cell phone. Your car is a wireless hotspot, your car is a Wi-Fi receiver, and your car is a Bluetooth transmitter and receiver.
But there are other important similarities too. Just as we often think of our phones as singular entities that send off data to Google and Apple, we regard cars the same way, sending off our data to Mazda or Toyota. But with our phones, data sharing doesn't stop with the device manufacturer, because we then go ahead and install 100 different apps on it, and each of these apps also sends our data to countless companies. It turns out that cars actually work in a similar way.
Cars are platforms where a lot of other services are bolted on top. Most consumers don't realize that when they're driving, there's hundreds of companies literally that are collecting data from that vehicle and profiling you.
Some information might be going to the manufacturer, some may be staying locally on the car, some may be going to your insurance company, some may be going to a technology that you've opted in to use.
Exactly what information is being collected and where it's going is pretty hard to figure out, varying by the make and model of the car. However, one thing we know for sure about basically all modern cars, data is being harvested by the trunkload.
The easiest way to figure out what exactly your car is tracking and has access to is to just open the app.
Sam Curry has spent a lot of time examining these car apps where you do things like check the engine status and check your vehicle's cameras.
If you ever wanted to see where your car's at, or start your car or unlock your car, you can now do that with your phone.
While these apps don't tell us the entire story, they do give us some insight into the data collection.
The actual data that gets logged by the car, that includes video feeds, microphone feeds. The actual GPS location over time is 100% being logged. Your car has these systems built in that'll actually log every interaction with the vehicle. So whether or not you unlock the car, turn the engine on, air conditioning, starting the engine, finding the vehicle's location.
These are generally marketed as really convenient features for consumers.
Being able to control and locate your vehicle via your phone is a really cool thing.
But it's also important to remember this fundamental principle.
If the app is free, you are the product.
By just like using the apps, you're kind of just giving that data to that company. They'll probably, hold it in perpetuity.
And often we're not just handing our data to those companies, we're granting them carte blanche to share our sensitive information with countless third parties. Yet despite this data free-for-all, there's a surprising lack of pushback from consumers. It's likely because many are unaware of the true extent of car surveillance. Even when they hear about data collection, the term data is so vague that it hardly sparks a reaction. So let's be more specific. When we say data, we're talking about things like camera footage.
Every time you drive home, every time you drive to a certain location and do certain things, those are being recorded and transmitted.
If I want to view like my live footage right now from my car, I click that button and then it gets remotely streamed to my device.
The camera footage doesn't go directly from your car to your app. It's beamed through some company's server. And because no car companies are end-to-end encrypting your footage right now, they have access to it, as does anyone else who gets access to their servers.
You're essentially allowing these third parties to monitor that and save that data like indefinitely.
Audio recordings are another piece of sensitive data that you might not realize others get access to.
Microphones are extremely common in cars, just because to operate hands-free, as you can imagine, any car with Bluetooth has a microphone in it.
There are all kinds of uses for these microphones. Some cars offer active noise cancellation, where microphones monitor cabin noise and try to cancel it out. Some have microphones that amplify the driver's voice to rear passengers via the car's speakers. There are built-in emergency response systems integrated with microphones, cabin monitoring that includes microphones and sometimes also cameras to check on the well-being of passengers. Cars these days even have their own inbuilt versions of things like Hey Google, Siri, and Alexa.
Voice assistants starting to be put inside vehicles.
This can be problematic. Have you ever been chatting in your living room and you say something like, "Let's go see a movie," and suddenly you hear,
"Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding right now."
That voice assistant has been sitting there listening to everything you say. And technically, it shouldn't start recording until it hears the magic wake word, but these things are always being falsely triggered, recording when they shouldn't be.
If you're talking about something else, it just automatically starts to record it.
This false triggering also occurs with the voice assistants in your car, only it happens far more often.
Your recordings are collected actually accidentally a lot more in vehicles than inside your home, because it's a noisy environment. There's vibration, there's noise from the street, etc. So there's a lot of much more false positives in vehicles.
Who gets access to all these recordings that are made?
They go to third parties, sometimes they share them outside of the company, or they're leaked or they're breached.
These recordings might be accessed by governments too.
If you get involved in like a legal thing, you could probably like retrieve those conversations like 2 months later via subpoena by the government.
Location data is another really sensitive piece of data that we're constantly leaking.
A lot of these vehicles like will actually log the very specific exact location. Certain cars will have a more active tracking where that data is being very specific about which street you're on, how fast you're going, where you're taking turns and stuff.
You might think that it's only cars equipped with integrated map apps that have location tracking capabilities. But hidden in nearly every modern car, regardless of the presence of a map app, is another device silently monitoring you.
The really like core piece of like the vehicle tracking stuff is like the SIM card itself.
That's right. Your car almost surely has a SIM card in it. We weren't joking when we said that modern cars were like smartphones on wheels.
They all have a SIM card that goes through a service like AT&T.
And these pinpoint your location, because in order to operate, SIM cards need to constantly ping nearby cell towers to signal their presence.
You can do like the multiple pingbacks using multiple cell towers to find like the specific location.
And this location data is now available to multiple different entities.
AT&T can locate your vehicle because, it has to have the ping back for the different cell towers. After it gets routed through AT&T, it then goes off to like a third party, like the actual companies that provide the tracking. Throughout the entire process, there's like these different companies that are just getting access to your data.
You might be tempted to remove the SIM card from your car. However, in many modern vehicles, it provides essential functionality, enabling data transmission, real-time traffic updates, remote diagnostics, and over-the-air software updates. They can also be essential for emergency services, infotainment systems, and all kinds of other internet-based services that are built into vehicles these these days. So the SIM isn't just a location tracking tool. It's fundamental to the transmission of all kinds of data from your car to companies that collect and use it. Another kind of data that's being collected from your car that may seem abstract, but it's just as sensitive as location, cameras, and microphones is telematics.
The word telematic, it basically describes like the infrastructure that supports remotely talking to a vehicle. So if I have my smartphone and I click a button and that fires off a request to my car, that's essentially considered like a telematic infrastructure.
Telematics capture a wealth of personal details. As well as when and where you drive, they reveal how you drive, offering insights into habits, routes, and schedules.
If I arrive at a location at 2:42 and I plug my keys in and turn the car on, that's going to trigger an event that's going to be sucked up by the server. Then in the future, if someone wants to kind of query that data, they can get access to that.
Such data in the wrong hands can be used to predict behaviors or exploit vehicle vulnerabilities, making it as sensitive as any direct personal data. Then there's sensor information.
Sensors now, they collect, your biometrics, they deeply profile you. Every time you sit in a car, it takes your weight, for instance. Nowadays, cars track where you're looking at the road. Some newer technology try to infer what are your emotions as you drive.
And if you've ever connected your phone to a vehicle, you've essentially unlocked an additional Pandora's box of data collection.
These things that we carry in our pocket, and then we connect it to cars because you want to, listen to their music, or you sync over Bluetooth because you want to take a hands-free call. And when you do that, the car essentially downloads a mini clone of your phone.
Wait, what? My car has ingested a bunch of data from my phone? What kind of data?
It used to be just, your contacts, and it became your text messages with the actual text messages. Nowadays, it's what apps are running on your phone, social media information, what photos you take, and what files you've downloaded, and so on and so forth.
Holy moly, I hadn't realized that modern cars were actively harvesting all of this stuff from my phone. I consider my phone a very private device, and now I'm just sharing all that information with the car every time I connect it?
You shouldn't be plugging into public USBs anywhere in the world. Period.
Okay, well, my car isn't a public USB. It's my personal car. Does it really matter if I share this information with my car? Yes, because remember, this data isn't staying with your car. It's shared with countless entities. You might want to seriously reconsider connecting your phone to your car in the future unless you want your photos, files, contacts, and messages to be potentially harvested. And it's not just the car sucking up data from the phone either. Your phone might actually be sucking up data from your car too.
Let's suppose that you plug in your phone and you use Android Auto. Well, Google now is getting data from you. Not just from the phone, it's actually collecting data from the car and sending it through the phone back to Google.
The modern-day data exchange that goes on behind closed doors with modern cars is shocking and egregious, and people largely don't know what's happening.
There's an entire explosion of data collection in cars.
The worst part of it is that we have no idea who will get access to this data. Car companies, ad companies, hackers through data breaches, and of course,
massive data brokers that collect data from all sorts of manufacturers and they sell it.
Even governments get this data. Regardless of whether you feel you live in a safe country with a good government now, regimes come and go, but this data is forever. Do you really want your voice recordings, location history, and camera footage to be available for anyone to peek over at any time in the future?
Your data is 100% being collected, monitored, and then government can kind of ask for that information. If that data is accessible and they have a legal means to go about getting that data, they're absolutely going to take that data. Videos from your car, all these telematic events for, doors opening, engine starting, and the actual location is being sucked up and can now be subpoenaed by the government or potentially a malicious attacker.
This data is a liability, and car companies have a giant target sign painted on their backs. But consumers are ultimately the ones who will be hurt. In an upcoming video, we're going to show you how you can opt out of some of this collection and better protect yourself. But for now, we really need to get a conversation going around car privacy and increase awareness. In recent years, general privacy awareness has already started to pick up steam as people wake up to surveillance in the digital age.
This conversation about data collection, it's been an ongoing conversation for operating systems, for consumer devices for like everything for the last like 10 years.
But applying this conversation to cars hasn't quite dawned on most people yet, because consumers are still largely in the dark about it all.
As more consumers become more aware of like all the data in which like vehicles are collecting, I think more consumers are going to want out, and they're going to say that they're not really comfortable sharing this data.
So it's vital that we let them know. As we continue in this car privacy series, you'll come to understand why it's so important that we push back against the normalization of these practices. And we'll teach you helpful tips that you can use to start to protect yourself. NBTV is funded by community donations. If you'd like to support our free educational content, please visit nbtv.media/support and take a look at our book, Beginner's Introduction to Privacy, that also supports our channel. And liking, sharing, and commenting really helps us to reach more people. Thank you so much for watching through till the end, where you get to see this dance.